Let's see.
So people just start joining. Do we get to see them?
I've got YouTube on the other channel, but it hasn't gone live yet.
Okay. Can you ping the link?
Yeah, I'll put it in WhatsApp. Here we go. All right, we are live. Look at that, Tin. You've set us up beautifully. Nice.
Olaf in the house. Boom. Straight in.
Oh, here we go. Hey, Olaf, good to have you here. There we go. We got the whole gang joining in. Lovely.
Marika.
Yeah. It took her about 10 minutes to figure out how to log into Google again after we switched from Google at work.
Right. You going to send me that link, John?
Yeah, sorry, I put it in a different one. Sorry. Good. All right. So we've got people waiting to get in. What's going on there? Let's have a look. 48 watching. Okay, great. Here we go. So we have got Gary coming from Canada. Very nice. New York in the house. A few Oslo, Austria.
I like the way that everybody knows now to say where they're dialing in from.
Yeah, very good.
Let us know in the chat where you're coming from. So, like John's saying, Canada. We can see.
I know Oscar back here. Where are we today? We got Oscar. We've got. Here we go. UK. Yeah, if everyone jumps in where you're watching from, super good. And then we'll get cracking in just a few minutes.
Colorado in the house. Casablanca. Nice. Mumbai, India. Hello.
That's first. Oregon. Nice.
This is great, isn't it? Marla, I recognise Marla. Just been following me on Insta and Substack. Hello, Marla. I recognise Albert as well. Albert's a regular, isn't he?
Albert's the one keeping the lights on. He's doing God's work for us. Yeah.
Radek, recognise the question. I think Radek sent us a good question actually, which I'm gonna ask in this chat.
Nice.
It's so great, isn't it?
So great. See there on the side, yeah.
It's great seeing where everyone's dialing in from. Buenos Aires, nice. One of my favourite ever cities.
Chamonix, here we go.
Katie Moore, friend of mine. Hello, Katie. Oh, better turn that off.
There we go.
John, where are you? You're in Austria.
I'm
right?
in Austria today. Yes, I did the drive up from Portugal over the weekend and got here. Thankfully, there's a bit of snow on the ground, which is nice. So yeah, it's good. And you look, Matt, today like you're still in your shed, but it looks like you've got wetsuits in the background.
Yeah, I've been doing a bit of surfing actually in the English Channel. So
has there been any swell?
You know what? We've had a couple of good days. We've had a couple of actual, one of the, probably not the right thing to say, but one of the advantages of all these new hurricanes that keep happening is that Brighton seems to now get half decent groundswell. So we've had, I'd say like we've had 3 or 4 actual surf days where it hasn't been southwesterly wind swell with a 4-second period. It's actually been a groundswell with a 10-second period, which is unheard of for where I live.
Nice. Wow.
Which has been super fun. Yeah.
Super
and then,
nice.
like you, I am going to the mountains on Thursday. I'm going to drive out to the French Alps on Thursday and go and stay with a very close mutual friend of ours, Chris Moran, in Moselle, which I'm really looking
very
for.
Nice.
Yeah. And Trolls, where are you right now?
I'm in the Oslo office actually. So I'm in Norway, sitting here in my little glass bowl at the DBHQ.
Yeah,
nice. You've got the retro sign behind.
Yeah, the OG one. Yeah,
keeping it real.
Oh, we do. Keeping it real here for sure.
So I can get us underway here. We're 5 minutes past. So
let's do it.
I forget the number exactly. I think Tin will probably tell me, but I think we're around 25, 26 creative exchanges that we've done at this point.
24, John.
24. We aim to do these every month. So if this is your first one, great to have you here. As I say, we do these either in person or we do them online. The last couple we've done, we did one last month, which was featuring Kevin Backstrom, Estelle Pensiero, Sage Kotzenberg, that we actually had Henry Jackson host. He had some great feedback on that for his backcountry awareness. Other ones we've done recently, we did Kendal Mountain Festival in the UK, which Matt hosted with Chris Burkhardt. We've done one recently in Bergen with the crew up there, the student crew, which was a great one. So we tried to do these every month, again, in person or online. We aim to do these to give value to the community of DB, because we think that we can all learn quite a lot from each other. And so I suppose for the last one of the year, we thought, why don't we go to the man at the top, who we can probably all learn the most from, and that is Truls, the founder of DB, to tell us a bit more about the journey of the brand, how it started, the journey along the way. And obviously with the news of a new minority investor a couple of weeks ago, we thought it was the perfect time to get Truls on. Along with Truls, we always aim to have very expert hosts. So that's why we brought Matt along. Matt being the host of the Looking Sideways podcast. Also as an entrepreneur, he has his own business, which he seems to run alongside a full-time podcast program. So just before we kick off, if there's anyone who's just joined us, jump into the comments, let us know where you're watching from. We've just had Lithuania, jump in. And otherwise, Matt, I will let you take it away.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, me and Truls were just talking about that, actually. We were talking about, because my company's a lot smaller than DB, so I'm actually really interested as well in like learning a few things from this conversation, particularly around like growth and culture, which I think is really such an interesting topic for businesses like ours, where we, they come from a place of passion originally, don't they? And then as you try and develop them into like actual businesses, that's part of the challenge. So that's something that I'm really interested in. But what we're going to do today is we've got an hour, and we're going to try and, as the title says, track DB's growth from this small startup that Truls began in Norway to where it is now, which is, a rapidly growing global travel brand with an increasingly high profile, with a huge innovative product range, with a lot of ambassadors operating in different markets and categories, and kind of find out like how that went. So I think the first question, Truls, has to be like, how did it start? Where did the idea come from?
Well, first, just want to say hello to everyone. This is my first kind of creative exchange, so I hope I managed the technicality here okay and everything is working fine. And yeah, let's. I can start to tell a bit about kind of how the entire company started, and I think every entrepreneurial journey has its own take. So I think when you hear people talk about entrepreneurship, you need also to understand that it's that's that journey, and I think you can draw a lot of learnings, and there's a lot of similarities in every entrepreneurial journey, but there also are differences. So I guess going into this, I'll tell you a bit on kind of my perspective on how it's been. But it started for me when I was studying at the university in Norway called the Norwegian University for Technology and Science, NTNU. And I was doing a master's degree in mechanical engineering. And after doing that for 3 years, I found out that that is a bit too much, call it left brain work. I really like structure. I really like, all the analytical and kind of strategical work that you can do, kind of thinking rational. But I also really enjoy the right side brain work, which is the creative side and everything from that. So I found out that for me to kind of only do mechanical engineering is kind of too much math and only science, even though I love that as well. So I needed to get a bit more creativity in my work. And what I've learned actually during the later years is that is probably my biggest strength as an entrepreneur, is that I can both be analytical and creative at the same time, and work with both those two sides of my brain in an okay way, and that has maybe been my biggest strength as an entrepreneur, actually.
It's really interesting that you say that, just to jump in quickly, because I think one of the things that you realize as you develop as an entrepreneur and as you develop as a business owner, that creativity is a huge part of it, right? Like, it is, like, running a business, I think, is a creative challenge. Like, ultimately, like, you have to, it's a lot about problem solving. It's a lot about, ultimately, it's about taking one big idea through to completion and evolution, isn't it? As you go through that journey. Have you found that?
Yeah, for me, I think it has been one of the big parts. But I think that for any entrepreneur, you need to recognize what your strengths are and focus on those. And I know we will talk more about team later, but to try to be best at everything, it doesn't work. So you need to assemble a team that actually can, make you work at what you're really good at, and then try to make this surrounding of people around you that can help you where you're not that strong. Because I think kind of the first realization you need to understand as well is that building a company is hugely complex. And yes, you can get it to a certain level by yourself, but you won't be the expert in everything. So you need to kind of build a team quite quickly, and you need to find out what are you good at and what can you really contribute to a company and where do you need help. So for a lot of people, I think it's the creative side, but I also know, very analytical entrepreneurs, and that could be a huge strength as well. But then maybe they need more of the creative part in their founding team.
Yeah.
So I think it varies from startup to startup, but I think you need to be very aware of, or quite fast get aware of your strength. I think that is a huge plus in that sense.
Did that come easily to you? Because it sounds like when you talk about that was quite an early realization for you. Like, actually, this is what I'm good at. This is the idea that I have. This is what I need as an individual. You said the left brain and the right brain thing, which made a lot of sense. But you also recognize where you would need support. Was that a hard lesson for you, or did that come naturally?
Well, for me, it kind of started a bit earlier than actually at that stage. I'm a dyslexic. So, when I was in school, like all the way down to kind of the lowest level of school, I saw that, to gain knowledge through reading, that wasn't my thing. And actually, when I went into middle school, I decided that I wanted to do something about this. And that's the first time I ever went on a project where I had to work outside the box, because everyone else was learning from books, right? So I got the first laptop in my school at that point, and I started to become kind of a master on all these search platforms before Google even existed, like Alta Vista and all those kind of places, and really used computers as a tool to gain knowledge. And I think that was the first time that I figured out that, I'm not necessarily good at everything that the others are, but I can be good at something else that can be equally powerful over time. So a bit of the reason why I think DB has always been extremely digital and always been kind of platform thinking in terms of the early setup of, we were extremely early on the Magento platform and all this e-commerce platform, was basically my, dyslexia from the early years and all the interest in technology that brought that into the company. And that was in the past a disadvantage, but it became an advantage over time.
Wow, that's so interesting. So you were able to kind of take something that had been a real challenge for you early and turn it into something that worked really effective for you. But not only at that initial time, like you talk about, but through your career, really.
Yeah, and it applies for sports as well. When I was young, I played a lot of team handball, which is, bigger sport in Europe than it is in North America and other places. But there as well, I actually brought, snowboarding into that sport from my side. I brought mental training into that sport. So I was running around with headphones in the warm-up and getting into kind of the right activation mode through using music as kind of meditation, either if you want to go up on your activation curve, or if you want to go down on it to, come in your peak performance. And that again is combining, taking inspiration from other places and put it into a set where it's not used too much, and then it becomes kind of a novel knowledge in that field that kind of sets you a bit apart, and that can become again an advantage. So I think you can use your disadvantages and then focus on other advantages that you can use as a strength later on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great lesson, and I think it's something that everybody recognizes when they start to go through this process. So let's talk about the brand. Obviously, I remember when the brand came out, actually, because I've always worked in action sports and winter sports, and obviously from the beginning it had this like iconic product, firstly in the ski bag and then later the board bag, and then it also had this very standout name, which is behind you, douchebag originally. And, you know, immediately it had a big presence and it was innovative, because that bag at the time was hugely innovative when you thought about the existing ski and snowboard bags that were on the market. You know, it did come in and it solved a problem, right? So was that what was at the heart of the idea? You saw a chance to make a better product ultimately.
Well, I can continue a bit on the story where I started, because when I was at the university, then I wanted to, you know, change my master. So I decided to take a split master in entrepreneurship and industrial design. But before doing that, I had a year off just to get some perspective. And that's actually when, for me, this journey started. So first went to South Americas, to Bolivia, and did some volunteer work over there. And that was super, super interesting and very rewarding in El Alto in La Paz, in the capital of Bolivia. It wasn't very long, but it gives a lot of perspective to work with children in a, you know, in a poor environment. And also when you're building a company, I think culture is so important. And that's why, you know, that experience actually helped shape this company as well. And then I climbed some high mountains in the Andes. And then the last part was to learn to surf, because I grew up in a snowboarding community. That has been my, you know, that has been my master class when it comes to brand building and all that. That I saw all the snowboarding brands that came in the 90s, and I was a part of that first wave of snowboarders in Norway, and I wanted to learn the surf culture. So that's why I traveled then up the coast of South America, Central Americas, and then Caribbean and North America, and New Zealand and Australia, and traveling with a surfboard the entire time. And that surfboard got destroyed and dinged, and it was like always, you know, something to fix on it. And that was the first time I really started to look into travel gear for extreme sports.
Okay.
So the surf bag was, you know, for me, when I was traveling, I started to build my own surf bag with styrofoam and bubble wrap and all this kind of stuff to protect the board better. And then when I get back to Norway, I stopped by Hoddevika, which is this beautiful surf spot in Norway. So on the west coast of Norway, and the next thing you have is America on the other side, and you have these big mountains going down and this nice little wave coming in. So I was there and I was lying in the surf, and in the surf, I saw Jan, and I've been following his blog, text blog from that before that, and of course knew who he was in the skiing world, and always thought that he was a super innovative and, you know, very kind of breaking rules, defining the sport rider. So I paddled up to him and we started to talk about this, traveling with extreme sports gear. And both of us found that, you know, this has been a huge problem. If it's skis or snowboards, or if it's surfboards, or if it's other kind of, call it passion sport gear. So we actually, on that beach that day, started to talk about, you know, how this can become better. And there was kind of a few insights that we had at that point. It was, first of all, that there was no functional product for this category. Everything was kind of sub-optimal design. And going into industrial design study, you could see quite well that, you know, this was a category that nobody really thought much about.
Yeah.
And then also we saw that, you know, there is no brand that is speaking to the community of the creatives, basically. And what we wanted to have was a brand that basically was taking inspiration from Red Bull, but also taking inspiration from the fashion world, like Acne, and kind of collide those two into something clean, so that you actually could wear your, call it, you can roll around with a ski bag in London, the same as Chamonix, and it didn't look like you, I don't know, it didn't look like you were totally out of place. So like, how could you take that clean Scandinavian design and bring that to this category? And then also we saw a shift in marketing, or we believed in a shift in marketing. So Jan was really big into into text blogs. He was, he hadn't really got into YouTube that much, but he had a YouTube channel as well, and he had started to make, his vlogs and stuff like that. And we really believe that there would come like a time where these social platforms would become super strong. So how could you build a brand on this instead of having to have this huge marketing budget and try to kind of reach through the ordinary marketing channels?
Yeah.
So those were kind of the insights in the beginning.
Yeah, so you identified a niche, you identified a need, you identified like a product gap. And I think you're right. Like there was a lot of like, board brands, for example, and ski brands. Yeah, they were obviously like more at the cutting edge of like marketing, how they were marketed. But there was a lot of areas that you subsequently capitalized on, backpacks, ski bags, like luggage, that were just kind of an afterthought, really. Also, like you say, the marketing clearly took a lead from the culture as well, didn't it? Because from an early time, you were using kind of like quite eye-catching stunts. You were kind of coming up with these creative ways of talking about the company. I remember, for example, going to ISPO in the early days and seeing how you guys had stood out in that environment.
Yeah.
And did take those kind of, as a theme of this talk is developing these shortcomings and turn them into an advantage, like the lack of budget to do a huge marketing campaign, for example. And this sort of takes us from, this is like what we can call phase one of the company, right? So from when are we talking? Is this like 2012 maybe?
Yeah, when I went back to the university, that was in 2010. And then I, from my point of view, then I did, next to my studies, I was stitching the first products at the university with my mom's old sewing machine. Right. So we kind of developed the product there. And then the faculty of NTNU bought an industrial sewing machine. So then you could actually make something that was much better. That product actually is right here. This is the first one that I stitched that actually was functional. Wow. And it actually looks really good as well in terms of all functionality. It is working as it should. And then it was basically to try to find a production for this. So that was going to China, and sourcing is a whole different chapter that we could probably spend another hour on. That's a hugely interesting journey when you haven't done it before. Yeah. To go down and find the right factories, and you're ending up at the same factory twice with two different owners that say they own the factory, and you kind of figures out nobody of them own the factory. They're just a middleman that trying to sell in that factory. So there's a lot of learning in trying to find the right sourcing parts as well. But for us, we landed on a factory that was half Norwegian owned. So we knew that the CSR was taken care of from the beginning. Yeah. And then it was financing the first production batch. And that was basically just all the life savings going into one production batch. And then, of course, Jan made this amazing YouTube video and kind of showed the product to the entire community. And that was the first part of the brilliant marketing. And he kind of showed this product, how it worked. And it was, I think it was kind of one of the first time, at least in our category, that there was a YouTube launch of a product, especially when it comes to these kind of things. And it really, really went viral within the community. And what we saw was that, the product and everything was basically, it was so much better than everything else that all the skiers and snowboarders, they were like, okay, this is a game changer in terms of this category. And I think that's what you need to have. First, you need to have a super, super good product, and then you need to have a good way of kind of distributing that to the community and the users as well. So that's kind of how we got it going. And I think it was a really, really good combination of Jan and myself at that point, because we were an extremely small team, but it was, totally different what we were doing. He was doing kind of all the front end and marketing part, as we talked about earlier, and I was doing kind of everything else in terms of building to make it work. Yeah. And that was fully complementary knowledge in terms of what assets we had at that stage, and that basically got it off the ground. So that's how I would say the super first part of it started. With a very small team, and it was me, it was Jan, it was Erling, and then later a bit my wife came in as well. So we were 4 people in the start that basically got this off the ground.
And when you look back on those early years, like what was the most difficult point? Was there ever a point? This is a question from Gabriel, actually, who put this on Instagram stories, which was a good question. He asked, did you ever feel like giving up on your entrepreneurial journey at this point? And if so, what kept you going? Because in the story of every entrepreneur, there's always a point when things get really difficult. You know, you've talked about factories, you've talked about there are recessions, there are, you know, later on there's COVID, there's that things come along that you have no control over, challenges happen, and you can be faced with decisions. So is there a point that you can think back on in these early years that was particularly challenging?
Well, I think everyone has their challenges in terms of building a company. It is extremely hard. It takes a lot of work. I think in the beginning, that thought never struck my mind because, you know, I was straight out of uni, had very large working capacity. I didn't have any kids at that point, and you could basically work, you know, full clock. Like you slept and you worked. That was the 2 things that you did. Maybe had a workout in the middle there sometimes. And that was okay because you learned so much and you were so motivated. So I would say that the first period, the first years, that is like a full dedication. At least in my experience, that's how it was for me and for us. But that wasn't a problem because it felt like you learned so much. And I remember when my parents asked me as well, like, you know, is it right to use all the money that you saved because I've, you know, always worked in the summer and saved that money and had small projects always going and kind of build up a small buffer. But is it right of you to spend all that money? And then also after the uni, I said no to you know, a lot of job offers from headhunters,
Right.
and they were paying like, you know, 100K a year right straight out of uni, and I went to a job where I had no pay for many years, and it kind of feels a bit unlogical in some sense. But from my point of view, it didn't, because I learned so much that I felt like, you know, I'm getting the best MBA of you can get in the world, and if this doesn't go, like the experience that I would, you know, be stuck with is so unique, and it's so hard to get elsewhere. You can't learn this stuff. You need to experience it. So for me in that starting phase, no, there wasn't like a time that I thought that this isn't worth it. It was, of course, it has been challenges times during the building, and I think the worst period was probably when, you know, we started to grow a lot in 2017, 16 to 17. Then we had a growth of 220% from year on year.
Wow.
Went from 24 million NOK to 78 million NOK in 1 year.
Wow.
And we didn't foresee it coming. So we didn't build the organization fast enough. So at that point, I believe I had close to 12 jobs in the company,
right,
or 12 functions that I was handling.
Right.
And at the same time, I became a dad, and my kid had milk allergy, and we didn't find out. So she woke up from 10 to 20 times every night, and we lived in a small apartment.
Okay.
So of course, that's the first time I felt that, you know, you meet your limit. You know, as when you're being young, you think that, you know, you can walk on no sleep, you can just keep going. It like everything, like you never met your limit before, so you don't know that it is a limit, right?
Yeah.
But that's when I met my limit, and I totally burned out. So that was a few months then that I was like, remember I was lying in the bed signing contracts because I was, you know, I had, I think there was 3 flus going in Norway, or influenzas going in Norway that fall, and I had all 3 of them because there was no immune system. Yeah, first one, and then jumped straight to the second, and then the third, because there was no immune system left, right?
So it sounds like it was a perfect storm of like family, work, like and kind of like all these factors like creating this kind of storm for you, really?
Yeah, I think that, you know, you only have that much, like your life is it's a balance sheet, right? You have that much of energy, and then you need to spend it wisely. And if you use too much energy every day for a long period of time, and you don't sleep enough, you don't get to work out and all that kind of stuff, then of course it's natural what's going to happen. It's easy to see in retrospect, but so that was probably my hardest period. And also when you see that, you know, it affects your family, then you really start to think, is this worth it? And also when you kind of put down this much work, then it's kind of, you know, that's when you start to question, because then you start to go on your ethics and morale. And if you are not aligned with that, then I think you can't do it for a long time. But luckily, we managed to build a very strong management team right after that, and everyone was like, "This is a huge wake-up call. If he's out again, and we don't have this management team and the team around him, then of course the company is gonna fail." So everyone was like, "Okay, let's build the team around. Let's go for it." And we did that, and we spent 2 years building an amazing team. And you know, then everything felt like, okay, we're on the right path when we made that decision to really build a team and not try to bootstrap it so hard that we've done up until then.
Yeah, and this brings me to the question that we briefly talked about earlier. Like, you've made it really clear that the company was about culture as much as it was about growth and business. You know, like you've come from snowboarding. You came from, you know, you were inspired by travel. You were inspired by surf. You met Jon in the surf. Like, you know, this is not like VCs sitting down to like carve up a category. You know, this is an organic thing, right? So culture is obviously, and you know, I'm lucky enough to work with DB quite closely, and what I can see now in 2024 is how important culture is to this company, and how much it informs the community that you have as an organization. So when you were going through this period that you described, like 2017, 2018, is this the point where, because it's hard to do that, right? When you go through that kind of growth that you've just described, and you're trying to manage product growth, brand growth, you know, like supply chains, all of these like actual kind of hard business factors, but also grow a culture at the same time as putting this management team in place. How did you manage that? How did you strike that balance? Because you obviously managed it really successfully.
Well, thank you.
Well, I don't think that's that easy. I don't think, you know, and I like, just to very briefly speak about my experience, like in my company, I'm kind of going through this right now. Like we're going through a growth period, and the main thing that I'm concerned about is how can I keep what makes the company at its heart as we grow. So what advice have you got for me?
Well, I think it's one of the most important questions in building a company, actually. Like we talked about the product, I think the product needs to be there. It's, you know, if you don't have the product, it's not going to last either way, whatever you build. But I think that, you know, you really need a strong team around you. And I really think that you need a strong culture. That has been my motto since starting the company. And I can share from where it comes, actually, because I said that I was playing handball before. And I used to play on a club team in Norway, and also played on the junior national team of Norway. And I also played on a few other teams when I was studying. And what you see is that it's the culture within the team that makes, you know, decides how good the team is going to be. Of course, you need to have good skills within the people playing in the team. But if they don't work together, and if they don't have a shared culture, then, you know, then it won't really, you know, it won't come to fruition. You won't be able to play on what's the potential of what you're building. So for me, culture has always been almost the main thing, people and culture. And I think it comes from both, you know, the family values that you have and so on and so forth, that, you know, for me, it's been natural all the time. Build a strong culture has been super important. And I have this recipe that we use within the company. I say that, you know, everyone here is kind of sick of tired of me hearing me saying this phrase, but I made a formula for it internally, and it's called PC equals CP. And it's people times culture equal company performance. And that has been with us since the beginning. So it's basically a few things that you can do when it comes to this. Like, first and foremost, the culture of a company can't be dictated. It comes from within, right? So you can put all these fancy words on a slide and say, this is our company culture and this is our value. I don't believe in that. I believe that what you do at work is what becomes the culture of the company. It can't be dictated. It needs to live within. And that has always lived within us, that we try to really be caring for each other. We really try to build each other up. We really like try to help each other and try to share our knowledge and really have like a warm but professional and performance culture within the company. And again, that's what I saw within the sports as well. That's what worked the best, and that's what I wanted to recreate in this environment, because it just makes everything so much more fun to work within. Then, of course, the most important part, what affects the culture the most, is the people.
Yeah.
So within DB, we have extremely thorough hiring processes. I mean, everyone who has gotten a job in DB, they were interviewed by, a lot of different people in that process. And I believe that someone will think like, okay, I've gotten jobs before. It's been much easier than getting a job at this company. But that's exactly for that reason, that we want to ensure that the culture is right. So they go through different people that they talk to within their own teams, within other teams. They talk, like every hire that comes into the company still talks to me. And this is just to get a 360 view of a person to see if it fits the company and the culture that we have internally. So again, I think you just need to nurture what is there and try to also lead by example, and then ensure that you can help each other and just create a atmosphere that is warm and also professional, and find the people that really wants to build something and do something together. So reading people quickly in a hiring setting is super important. And what I also see is that it's just like when you make a fireplace, right? You can't fire one wood brick by itself. It needs to have another one, and they bounce their energy from each other, and that's exactly what good people do as well. You get so much more when you have good people surrounding each other, and that's maybe the most important thing that I managed to do, is to hire the right people. And I think from a founder point of view, to build the right team from the beginning and ensure that the leadership of the company also shares the values and that the culture of the company, and that's super important.
Yeah, I'm going to warn everyone now. I think we're going to overrun because this is so interesting. I'm gonna I might sack off the fact we're going to try and keep it to an hour, to be honest, because there's so much interesting stuff here, and I actually have a bit of a specific question on hiring that you just mentioned, which is so if you were going to hire somebody and they could do the job but weren't a good cultural fit, or were a good cultural fit but weren't quite as natural fit for the job itself, what do you choose? Is the cultural fit more important, or is the performance on the role more important?
Well,
I think yeah. But
well, the answer is to be patient and don't hire any of those, and do another round, right. and actually, take the time. Yes, this will take longer. You will scale a bit slower, but you will have that person as a part of your culture and team for years. And if it's a really good fit, you will have, the other people within the company, but also, have a better day at work. So I think that, you really need to think that way, that it's actually one of the most important things that you do is the hiring process. So, yeah. But if I had to choose from the ones that you said, I would definitely go for culture any day. Yeah, no question asked.
Yeah, that's what I thought you'd say. Well, let's move it on to the next phase of the company, because obviously a really significant moment in the history of the company was the name change, and we had a lot of questions about that. And I'm sure it's probably the question that you hear the most, really. Well, there might be another one, but this is certainly a common question, I imagine. And this came from Radek, who I think is on the call, actually. Why did you change the name from Douchebag to DB? Why was that important for the brand?
Well, I didn't change the name. We did, first of all. No, but, when we started the company, we have always wanted to create tension. We always wanted to come from a subculture and stand out and dare to do our thing. And as you said as well, when we brought Jan's car to ISPO, we were the only one who fired up our car at the trade show. In the breaks, we almost got thrown out every single year. But that was kind of, okay, this is how we do it. We need to be able to dare to stand and stand for what we're doing. And DB, or douchebag as a name, worked super well in the beginning. It really created that contrast that we wanted, you know, the extreme sport towards kind of the mixed with fashion. It really helped to create that tension that we wanted to have. But as it became bigger and bigger and the company matured, we saw that, especially in the US, we were meeting a lot of difficulties with the name, actually. So we wanted to see, you know, we want to ensure that the potential of the brand could, you know, continue to grow as it, you know, should. And we also wanted to find a transaction or a transition from, you know, where we come from to where we're going, and ensure that we don't lose ourselves along the way. So it was never kind of a idea to just, you know, this is the past, we're nothing like that anymore. This is a part, like a proud part of our founding journey, is kind of our name and our evolution of our name. Yeah. So we saw that we wanted to fit better in our international expansion phase, because we were kind of going through the startup phase and we're moving into scaling phase. Yeah. And then we saw that we needed to make some adjustment. And I can tell a bit, like, in general, when you build a company, it's a lot like walking in stairs, because you always are at the level, that's where you are right now. But you kind of can watch over to the next stair, and you see kind of what is needed to take that next step up to the next phase of business. And when we were standing there, we saw that if we're going to take that next leap in terms of our scaling journey, then we need to do some changes. We need to grow up. And this is from everything from building your team to kind of your processes internally and so on and so forth. And we saw the same thing here in terms of our brand perception. So then we did a full process in terms of how can we make a natural evolvement of where we are without losing where we come from, not losing our identity, not losing our counterculture position, because that's who we are and where we come from, and kind of mature it into this next phase. And then we found what we think is a quite clever way of doing that, is to basically just focus on the D and the B and let the D and the B be whatever we want to be. Like formally it stands for Design in Scandinavia, built for the journey. But it could be like our sustainability strategy, as an example, which is do better. It could be our company strategy, which is dream bigger. So you can use it in many different ways, and you will see that through our marketing as well, that they are really good at using that in several ways. And it kind of creates this full universe of creativity that we can play on, but also put a few frames for us. So we are within this is ours, and it creates a very clear brand identity. So I thought that the team did an amazing job there to really find the right way of doing it, and also managing to keep our full identity and moving into the future. So taking the next step, which you do quite often in an entrepreneurial journey, but then in a brand positioning way.
And obviously this also coincided with the brand's expansion into quite different markets as well. So, you know, one of the hallmarks of DB's recent years has been surf, skate. You know, you know, as we've described it in the title of this session, global travel brand. The hard case luggage, the surf bags. There's this thread of innovation as well that comes with this, like in the same way that the original ski and snowboard bags that you started out with, like were kind of best in category. You know, you've done the same with the skate bag. You've done the same with the surf luggage. You've done the same with the hard cases. Like, you've really, as you say, what's been impressive about it is like the evolution, not only the brand evolution, but the product evolution, the category evolution, and the marketing and the ambassadors that you've got, Geordie, Chris Burkard, Craig. You've managed to like keep this DNA that began in snow sports as you've expanded into this, you know, second phase, if you like, which is quite a difficult thing to do, I think, because I think people that know the brand can look at, you know, I think someone who's been watching the brand for a long time, when a new product comes out, you kind of now at the point where you're like, yeah, this is going to change this game a little bit. Surf bags, classic example, insofar as like, it's a bit like what you described from ski and snowboard bags. That product had just been a bit of a shitty product for years, hadn't it? Like there just wasn't really any innovation. It was just like, you just got this big bulky thing that didn't really work properly. Everyone tried to pad their boards out and stuff clothes in and all this. And obviously you managed to sort of keep that thread of innovation going, which has been super important, right? Is this where you personally, bringing it back to what you were talking about, your interest in left and right brain thinking, is this where you're still getting these challenges? Like, how can I take the original approach into these new areas?
I think from us, like, we want to serve the creative community, and we want to kind of serve kind of the expert users, the core users of these communities. And I think the reason why we can make this product is because we are, we're deeply rooted into these communities ourselves. We really understand the use, and we have a deep knowledge of kind of the problem, if you can call it that, or the situation, like traveling with surfboards or traveling with skis and snowboards or skateboards and so on and so forth. And for us to be able to create these Spearhead products for these communities is, it is a way for us to give something back to the community. It's a way to show where our positioning, where we come from. It is a way for us to develop our internal innovations that we can use in other products as well. And also it's a way of, we had this slogan up in the second floor in the D&D space where, we said that lowest act of giving and not asking for anything in return. And that's kind of a bit what these products are to the community for us. It's our gift to them as well. And because, of course, these are not huge revenue driver, most of them, but it is definitely something that we, that we care about and that we feel are important and that really resonates with the purpose of the brand. So, so that's basically why we have continued to do this stuff. And I think also we are, I also think that we are doing this in a different way than most others. We are combining industrial design and, Scandinavian design philosophy, and all this, put a lot of effort into these products to really bring innovation to every single thing that we create. And that's I think kind of always where it started, and that's something that we kept the entire time as well. And it's truly important for the brand, right? Because it really shows where we come from and our authenticity to that.
Well, that's what the brand is now, isn't it? That that's what you've created. Essentially, you've created this kind of mark of community, creativity, and innovation that it stands for in these different areas, which is clearly why it stands out. Like whenever you kind of, because it's really difficult, isn't it? Like and you'll know this as well as anybody from coming from the culture, but like I remember hearing you were going into skate, and I was a bit like, oh, okay, interesting. Like they're going to go into skate, like because that, obviously that's potentially problematic, really. Like, but but the way it was done was had this thread of DNA, like I'm talking about, innovation, quality, community. Like it was really considered. And I think even what you said about like giving back to the community kind of comes through from even just stuff like the creative exchanges, right? Like it's a way of, it's about providing value, isn't it? Which seems to kind of run through what you guys do from start to finish, really. So I'm not, I mean, I think that's why it's a really fascinating conversation, this, because I kind of feel like I know the company quite well, but it's really interesting to hear your story of how over the years you've kept these threads as it's grown, and how important they've been to the success of the company. And that kind of brings us to the third phase now. So obviously,
I can just comment as well. I think kind of when you work with all this, when you work with the community as well, and you work with the pro users, like you said, either if that's Craig or Jordi or John or all these different pro users, you also get the most challenging users to basically input on your product. So you need to create something that is close to perfect. And when you get to that stage, you get a lot of insights on how you can apply this to other products as well, right? And I mean, when we created the luggage as well, which is again kind of a Spearhead, right, for the photographers, and can't really imagine someone who is carrying more expensive equipment when we make this this Spearhead for this category. So if it works for that and they dare to put their stuff in there, then you really have created something that will protect everything for everyone. So I think that is a huge part of it. And we already saw back in 2016, we created our first hard luggage actually to test it out a long time ago. But that was, again, we saw that the creative community, either if you're doing creative sports or photography or whatever, you can bring innovation to them to different product categories as well. It's like DB is not category specific or community specific. We are kind of more on mindset specific, I would say, which kind of gives us this huge playing field as well, which is super interesting.
Yeah, and you have to be prepared to listen, don't you? Because you said that you talked about the ambassadors and you talked about their input and you talked about how they're the, if you like, almost the hardest taskmasters. If you're gonna give Geordie Smith a travel bag, you're gonna want to make sure it's as good as it can be, right? For example, or someone like Burkhard as a photographer, like if you're gonna like work with him on a range, then obviously like that those are very, very critical, discerning people. But you have to be prepared to listen, don't you? You have to be prepared to take on board things that perhaps maybe you don't want to hear, or they might be more expensive solution, but that's where it becomes real, right? When you follow that through.
That has been with us since the beginning, right? When we created the first ski and snowboard bag, just as an example, I was sitting in the airport in Trondheim, in the basement where you have all the people carrying the bags, throwing it in, just sitting there for a full day observing. And then you understand kind of, that's a user of your product as well. You need to ensure that they are taken into the design consideration. And, Jan, myself, we were traveling a lot. So we were pro users, and then we had 150 other people that we interviewed as well in that process. So just if you go to the ski and snowboard bag, the reason why I think that we can create novelty and why we have so many design registrations and patents in this company is because we truly try to understand the user deeply before we start to develop a solution.
Yeah, and it shows. Again, it's part of the story now, isn't it? Well, we should start to move towards the final stage, and we will. I saw somebody said, "Can we have a question?" And I know there's a competition going on, so yeah, we will start to think about questions and put them in the chat, because I will take some questions from the group here so that we can ask trolls. But before we do that, let's talk about the latest chapter in the DB story, which is, so the company's just taken on investment, right? So which is a really significant step, right? So could you explain what that is and what technically, what is this? What has happened here?
Well, I talked about steps right earlier. And DB has come to a stage now where we see that, we are very ready to take the next step. And that is international expansion and scaling, like more than we have done, to really invest into new markets. And when you come to that stage, it became very natural for us to look for a partner in doing this, because it costs a lot of money and you need people who have done stuff before. It's super important to surround yourself with experience. And so then we went into a process. I don't know if you want me to talk a bit on how a capital raise process works.
Fire away.
Okay, yeah. No, so you basically decide that you come to a stage where you want to look for external capital or external partners. Depends on kind of what you want to have. From our perspective, we wanted to have someone who could really help the company to the next stage, not just, just money. Which could be, in many situations, that might be something that a company wants to sell, just money, but, make the people stay a bit away from the business. But that's not how we have done it. We always try to find the right people to be part of the journey. Talk about team, we talk about culture, and it's the same thing for the ownership as well. So we really wanted to find the right owner. And then you start a capital process, where you basically first decide on an investment bank that could help you in a process like this. You can do it by yourself, but it's a bit like selling your apartment, right? It can be a bit much to do if you're going to do your normal day-to-day work and then do that at the same time. Yeah. So then you go with something called an investment bank, where they basically help you with a lot of the documentation and help you a lot with the building the long list and the short list of potential investors. And we decided on a Scandinavian one called Carnegie, which have done several brand deals here in this region before and have a quite big network when it comes to brand deals. And then you need to have a lawyer as well. to help you with all the formalities, because that's where it's, at the end of the process, that's where you come to an agreement that you sign, right? And there as well, we chose a law company called Wiersholm in Norway. They are, specialized on these kind of transactions. And then you basically start to decide, create something called a teaser. So you create a document which is quite short, usually only 10 slides, where you present the company, but you don't really give any confidential information, to basically send out to your shortlist. And your shortlist, what we decided there is that you can go wide. There's very many investment companies around the world, and we have been in contact with very many of them over many years as well. They've come to us and asked if you need help, or can we invest into the company. But we decided that we want to go very strategically and only make a short list of the ones that we believe could help us into this next step. So we didn't go like a wide distribution, just a pretty narrow distribution. And then you give the teaser out, and then the next step is that you do intro meetings, which I do then with the investor, where I basically explain a bit about the history, explain where we're going, where we're coming from, and so on and so forth. And if they're interested in moving ahead, then they sign an NDA, and then they get something called an investment memo. And that's a huge document with a lot of information about the company, where they basically start to read through numbers and so on and so forth. And after that, you do management meetings, where you present the company, and they get to know the management of the company. And then at that point, you start to get in what is called soft term sheet. So people basically give like, okay, like your company, this is an offer for a stake in the company or invest into the company. And once you receive those offers, you need to then decide on which one you want to continue with, because then you maybe say you get 10 offers, and then you then select who you want to go with, and then usually go into exclusivity. So when we came to that stage, we decided that for us, when we went into the process, we have put put LVMH or LVMH Luxury Venture as kind of the top part, and those are the ones that we wanted to basically to invest into the company. And they had put down a soft proposal, and we basically went into that. So that's how it works. And then you go into the negotiation and so on and so forth, and you agree on the documents, and then you sign the deal. And the LVMH Luxury Venture Fund number 1 went into DB, which for us is probably the best thing that could have come in, we think, in this stage.
So what can you talk us briefly through what you will do with this investment? Like what does this mean for DB?
It means that we can continue our scaling journey, and that we have people who can help us along the way. So it is like building a team. It's building a team that is stronger with more experience. We have the financing we need for the next stage, and can continue to grow the company. So it's an enabler of the international scaling phase that I talked about.
Yeah. So it's like it's almost like, okay, we've got the brand to this point. Now to like get it to the next level, as you put it, steps globally, and continue this approach. Like we need to continue to build the team, basically, to bring in the right kind of expertise and investment to help us do that, essentially.
Basically, yes.
Yeah. So I guess one question that I've got is, before we probably move it to questions from the floor, is given what we've talked about safeguarding the company DNA through growth, like I'm guessing this is probably on your mind now that there are like external stakeholders involved. Like how can you take steps to ensure that what's kept DB unique to this point isn't diluted by having this investment?
Well, it's just like we talked about earlier in this conversation. It's, you hire the right people, you also engage with the right partner. So you make sure that is done before going through with the deal, that they basically understand where we come from. They understand our positioning. They understand our communities. They understand everything that we need them to understand, and they support our approach and basically see the value of everything. So you do that work before you sign the documents, to be quite honest.
Yeah. So this is almost part of the hiring journey that you talked about. This kind of cultural.
It is just on a different level, but yes, it is the same approach.
Yeah. To make sure that that's a good cultural fit before you move forward. Yeah. It's really interesting. Yeah. Well, congratulations. I mean, you must be a really great moment, right? Like after doing it for these years, like how are you feeling about it personally?
It feels like taking the next step, and it feels super good to be able to be able to do that. So super happy and super stoked about the next journey for the company, the next chapter.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so let's check out some questions from the group. So Tin, what do we got? We have a question from Laura. My favorite part of DB is the hook system. I know it was developed to take the load off the shoulders. Yeah, so this is one of the things I was going to talk to you about earlier, actually, because I remember just before I finished, just a bit of context. Like what I remember about getting my first board bag was it was modular, right? Like you could hook the rucksack onto the ski bag and the boot bag, which is what Laura's kind of talking about here.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Like who came up with that idea? Because that was again one of these innovative new ideas, wasn't it? And was this important as something to stand out in the market almost?
I can be honest on this question. This is actually when we created the length adjustment system, because we wanted to create a ski and snowboard bag that can be adjusted into the length, so it would fit everything. Not only that you have, like, say you have a pair of free riding skis and you maybe have a pair of slalom skis and you have a snowboard as well. They all have different length, right? And we wanted to ensure that you can use the same bag for all this gear, and then just adjust the length to whatever you're carrying there and then, and still it will stay stiff, because whatever's inside the bag will stiffen the bag, right? So so that's how the length adjustment system was created, and with those came the buckles as well to adjust it. So that was a natural evolution of that. But the actual idea came during a session with my friends in my dorm at Trondheim. So we were doing this session we called it R&D, but it didn't stand for research and development. It would stand for ROM and development. So we had a huge paper on the table, and every 15 minutes or something, we had a ROM shot, and this was as a pre-party for going out, right? And every hour we changed the sheet on the table, and we were just having a storming session on how to solve all these different problems. And during this session, on one of the papers is actually the original drawing of the length adjustment system, of kind of how to roll it in and to attach it together. So it came during that R&D session, ROM and development session, during a pre-party with my dorm friends at the university.
So it was literally you were all scribbling ideas down, and it was one of the ideas that you came up with. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a few questions about people that want advice, really, about how to get noticed by a company like DB. And this is a really good one, actually, because this from Matthias is talking about how you get noticed with a lack of experience. We've got another one from Thea who's talking about, I dream about working for DB. What's the best approach to get a foot in the company door? You've already talked a little bit about this in terms of what you're looking for, but could you give these guys a bit of an insight into this, what they're looking for here?
I think it's a really good question, and I know it's hard because there's, coming out of the university, you might not have found your way or have the expertise for a certain role that is being posted, right? Because usually it's 3 years experience or 5 years experience or something like that you need in order to get into a role. What we've seen in DB, which has been really good, is that quite a lot of the employees actually come through internships. So they come through internships and really prove themselves and show that they fit the culture perfectly. They're super smart, super bright. And then suddenly a position opens up and like, oh, you could definitely do that job. And from our point of view, then we kind of seen that, you know, they fit the culture amazingly. They're, you know, it is a match. So the risk of hiring is very low, right?
Yeah.
So that is maybe the best way that I've seen that students has come into this company. And then I think it is always smart to do something differently, so you stand a bit out. And I think Tin has talked about this as well, what he did in order to get a job in DB. He baked cakes and you know, did a lot of different stuff, which was good. And I mean, we have people moving to Norway from all over the world to work in DB. We have 24 different nationalities in our office, and that's because we really like to see people who has done something differently and have a special drive for a work or for working with us. And also you kind of see the culture fit and you see everything early on. But I think that internship is probably, it's a very smart way to get into a company.
Yeah, and like you say, finding a way to stand out, right? Because it's so competitive now, isn't it? Like so many people, you know, want to find these alternative roles, like work for these companies that have like culture and passion at their heart, right? So I imagine whenever you advertise for a role or even an internship, you have probably like a lot of applicants, right? So
we do get a lot of applicants. Yes, we do. So it was a bit easier before when we were smaller to kind of stand out. But yeah, I think it's a really good way to go.
So keep the questions coming. There's one here from Amund, I think. Inspirational, love the work. Do you have a favorite work memory?
Hey, Amund, how are you, buddy? I think my favorite work memory is, it's hard to actually choose one because there are many, but it definitely is when I see that people are having a good time at work and are doing good work at the same time. So there's many different parts of that. When I see when the kind of the community internally here is super good as well. I remember one time I was sitting working a bit late one day, and then suddenly I start to hear that in the room next to me, one of the conference room rooms here, there was like our employees were doing a Norwegian course, and they were sitting there, maybe, I don't know, 15 people in this room learning Norwegian, moving to Norway because of this job, most of them. And I was like, shit, we are so lucky that all these great people want to go here. They, you know, doing a task together, learning Norwegian, like what a journey. So I think that is one of them. And then also I remember the first time, every time you get samples when you develop a product, I think is really good. And yeah, so I think that is really good. And I also have to say, since this is coming from Amund, which is actually my nephew,
that's nice.
And I think that, you know, one of my good part as well is that I draw a lot of inspiration from my family and from Amund and from all my other nephews that is from a different generation than me, and always to get to talk to younger people and older people from different generations also something that I really, really enjoy with my work, that I get to meet all these people.
Yeah, right. And that must be one of the most fulfilling things as well, because you've talked about like people joining as interns and you've talked about people developing with the company. So like, you know, seeing people have these careers that develop through DB, through the culture, must be hugely satisfying, right?
It is.
So I think we've got time for a couple more. So let's have a look what we got. So we have, apologies if I've got the name wrong, Aporva, maybe. Hi, Charles. Really enjoying your candid perspective on building DB. What were the biggest breakthroughs while building DB as you took it off the ground and eventually scaled it? That's a good question.
Yeah. There's been so many breakthroughs as well, so it's really hard to select one, and they're all come in different stages, right? Like I talked about, when you do those steps, you usually get a breakthrough, or you usually kind of manage to do something that kind of changes the game a bit. But I think kind of, you know, of course the first sales and the first time you saw a product out in the wild on someone you didn't know, that wasn't your family or your friends who was testing something, that was of course extremely special. I remember working with people, like, again, when, I was, young student, like most of you guys as well. And Jan and I started to work together. That was like that was a step as well, right? So that was an important one. So there's been many of these, and right now it feels like one as well. When we get to work with LVMH Luxury Ventures, it really feels like another step. But most of the important ones usually is around people. I really, really enjoy when we've done a good hire, and you really feel like this is a good hire, and you can, I don't know, send the first text after you agreed, like a high five text. Those are also super, super good. So it has a lot to do with people, I think. The biggest on people and product, and then also seeing the brand taking the next steps.
Yeah, it feels like people is such a thread of this conversation and of the company history. So it makes a lot of sense that you would say that. Okay, so we'll do one more. And I think it's actually the last question from, again, apologies if I pronounce your name wrong, Rubiel. What was the process of branding like? The essence of the brand has been incredibly well put together, while taking advantage not only of the variety of sports, but also fashion itself. And I think that is a really good question, actually, because when, we talked about this evolution from douchebag to DB, this spread into different cultures and categories, and there, it's really cohesive, isn't it? It's really like you've managed to like maintain that brand equity, if you like, through that process. So can you talk us through a little bit of how that worked?
Well, the initial kind of brand positioning, Jan needs to get a lot of credit for it, because he was really good at finding contrasts that stood out, and kind of how can you make something that has several layers to it and that actually will stick. And I think that it's been refined over years many times after that. But for us, it's been always like, how can we keep our communities clear while combining it with something else, which has been basically what you're writing, like the fashion place, and combine it and create these contrasts that makes it interesting. So I think kind of that has been the entire time. How can we do stuff differently? How can we think of it differently? How can we try to not look like everything else? And like our CEO say, like, I don't want Me Too stuff. I don't want something that looks like everything else. I want something that stands out. And I think that has been kind of the essence since the beginning, from the product development process and philosophy. Like, how can we do something different using industrial design? How can you see from 30 meters away that this is something that they have created? Then it needs to be distinct, right? And how can you keep that distinctiveness not only in the brand but also in the product and everything that we do? So I think when it comes to those creative parts, I think that's probably the best answer that I can give.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, we're going to do one more, and it's the final question that's on the screen. The iconic hugger, which probably is, it perhaps is the iconic product for DB, although I'm sure you've got your own tools but it has become, it's been through the history of the company. It's been there, hasn't it? It's lasted through every iteration. There are still new collections coming out. It's hugely collectible. It's really diverse.
Yeah,
it evolves that product in terms of colorways, and it seems to be like perennially popular. So where did that come from?
Like every product in DB has a story, and it's really cool to be, to have a forum like this and actually tell them. So, and the hugger, of course, is one of my favorite in terms of the story. So it started with, first we created the ski and snowboard bag, and we want to have a boot bag that can be attached to it. The first initial kind of idea was, okay, how can we combine the ribcage system that was created into the ski bag into a bag? And there was actually a student called Kasper who made the first kind of, put the ribcage side and then made a square around that. And that was like, okay, so it can actually work for a bag. And then I took that idea of bag, how can we use it, and was going to a production trip into China. And when I was then boarding the plane in Oslo, I was sitting there and I was like, okay, now I need to work on the hugger. I need to design the hugger on my way to China because I want to sample it when I get there. And at the point there was only like a very simple thing that only had the rib cage system. So I was sitting in the plane and like, okay, I need to design a bag on this journey. And I was looking out the window and I saw the new Dreamliner. The Boeing Dreamliner had just came out, and you know, it has this beautiful wings that goes like this, and then it has this tip in the bottom. And I was sitting there and I was really enjoying kind of that shape. I thought it was so clean and aerodynamic. Of course, it's aerodynamic, but it was just so clean. And at the same time, I was really fascinated by the golden ratio. So, you know, everything in nature, as you know, has this perfect symmetry. A beautiful face have this perfect golden ratio symmetry. So I was sitting there and like, okay, what if you take the arc of the plane wing and combine that with the golden ratio? So while I was sitting there flying to Shanghai, I actually designed the look of the Hugger in Excel. It's a mathematically designed bag.
Wow.
So every measure that you will see on the Hugger has the golden ratio in it. And also this, you know, call it the iconic shape of the bag. Also the way that it goes up to the top and go down, it has the golden ratio in all angles. So it's when I came and I landed in Shanghai, I only had an Excel sheet. I hadn't even drawn it out. But I had a product that should be mathematically perfect. And based on that, went to the factory and started to basically build the samples. So that's the reason why you see this thing. And one more thing as well, the top pocket on the Hugger, because I always have my Moleskine or DB notebook. So the top pocket of the Hugger also, the dimension of that is to the original Hemingway Moleskine, so that I could fit the Moleskine in top. And then, of course, the laptop in the side, and then the boots or whatever you needed as a necessity. And then it had the golden ratio in mathematical beautiness. And then also it had the hookup system. So you could attach it over the wheel of the bag so that all the weight went, all the weight of the bag went straight to the wheels when you attached it on. So you didn't have to carry anything on your shoulder.
That is brilliant.
That's the story of the Hugger design.
I think Katie speaks for everybody in the chat there, where she's saying mind blown. And that's because like I've had a Hugger for like years, like, and the Hemingway Moleskine detail, like, that's brilliant, isn't it? Like I didn't even know that. Like, I've used that bag like probably like hundreds of times in like however many years I've had one.
Yeah, you need to have the bigger size now to make it fit on the top, but on the bigger size of the Hugger, it should
absolutely love that. Yeah. What a brilliant insight. Thank you so much, Charles. Hey, well, thanks so much, everybody. So couple of little housekeeping notes. So I will actually be releasing this as a podcast on Looking Sideways. So anyone that you might want to share it with can hear it through that. Also, this is going to be released on the DB YouTube channel, I believe, as well. So there's opportunities to listen to this and to watch this afterwards, because obviously I think everyone will agree that was like hugely insightful. So thank you, Truls, for sharing such great stories about DB and the products. John, I'm going to hand over to you quickly, because obviously we want to talk quickly about the new campaign, right?
Yeah. First of all, thank you everyone for watching. It's so good to see all the comments. It means the world to us. Truls, thank you for tonight. That was amazing. I think getting to hear the story of where all the products and stuff have come from, the stages of the business, has been amazing.
Did you know about the golden ratio thing? Did you know that?
You have to know about the golden ratio when you work at the. I mean, as soon as that question came in, I was like, we need to go over.
That's like interview question number one. Like,
yeah, it's a great thing to know. But yeah, I wanted to shed a little bit of light on that as well. We just released the holiday campaign last week. Tim just put a link at the bottom there. He's put a clickable link on the comments as well. We released that, I think 2 weeks ago now, and everything's based around this notion. I think the majority of the people on this call will know all about. We're all going home for the holidays, hopefully, and at some point you'll have a relative who'll just say, like, when are you actually going to get a real job? What do you actually do for work? And I think for most people, you'll have been there and you'll know that.
Well, can I just say as well, Truls had it, right?
Yeah.
Truls actually had it.
as part of that, one thing, we spoke about adding value, etc. Between Matt with Looking Sideways and DB, we're going to launch the second phase of the DB fund. So we're going to give away mentorship and funding for 2 projects. Each project can receive up to 5,000 euros for their project. So if you have an interesting story, it can be in the form of a book, a film. Matt, probably help me go further on the formats here.
Yeah, I can talk about this a little bit. So this is myself and John and Truls, everyone at DB, as you might have gathered, like we're all very, very passionate about like, creative ideas, like how we can help people bring this to life. Like I think one of the things that Truls just talked about so in such a great way was community, like how community is a huge part of DB, and how creativity and basically whether it's people that work at the brand, whether it's people in the communities, how you encourage this sense of creativity and community. So the DB fund is something that we've been working on. This is the second time we've done it. And what we're really trying to do is like give people a leg up to create their own ideas. Yes, there's funding, but also more importantly, there's mentoring. So we're going to choose 2 winners, and the deadline for this is the end of January. If you click the link that's in the chat, you'll get taken through to a page where you can apply for this. You'll get taken. There's a link there to my website where there's a lot of resources where you can kind of learn more about the way that we're going to judge this. And what we're looking for is we're looking for really original ideas about like stories that you want to bring to life. Like John says, it could be a podcast, it could be a book, it could be a film. It's really up to you guys to sort of tell us what it is that you want to make. And we're going to pick 2 winners. And we're going to try and support those 2 winners to bring these ideas to life. So we're offering, like John says, 5,000 euros per project, which is obviously a great leg up for this. But we're also going to provide mentorship. So it's probably likely to be me and John and some of DB's ambassadors, because obviously DB have got these incredible ambassadors. We've talked about Chris Burkhardt. There's Lewis. There's Craig. There's all these incredible people that have these careers and that can help us basically impart this knowledge to people. So it's something we're super passionate about. Like John says, it links to this new campaign because, as the campaign shows, and I can see people in the chat sort of talking about this, it's, that campaign really gets to the idea, doesn't it, about like how you live a different creative life that's on your own terms. That's what this is about, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think, I suppose to sum it up, there was quite a few questions in the comments there about how do I get a job? Sometimes the best thing I always find is if you just go out and create the best piece of work that you want to see in the world and don't worry about don't worry about the job itself. It's much easier to have a calling card of going to someone and like, hey, I've written a book on, we have a friend in Portugal, Felipe. He's just written a book about all the lighthouses on the Portuguese coast, and that's now his calling card. The guy who wrote Surf Shacks, which is a book which features beautiful architecture on the California coast, he has a graphic design agency, but he uses the book as kind of the calling card. And I think that's the thing. One of the best things to get ahead in your career is to go out and make the best, most creative project you want, and then have that as your sort of thing to show people. So kind of build the job you want versus apply for it.
Burkhardt did it, didn't he? You talked to Burkhardt. He got off his own back and made that book about Californian surf culture. And that's the idea behind the fund. Really, we want to help people to give them that first step to do that. So, yeah, check the link out, and I think we'll really look forward to seeing everybody's ideas.
Perfect.
Great. All right, Apurva, I'm glad I got your name right. Thanks for that. And yeah, thanks everyone, and I guess we'll see you next time.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening, and thanks for being part of the community.